Haven't heard you guys say anything. Do your mics work?
Okay, do you hear me now?
No, mine doesn't.
Okay, well, maybe we can slowly get started. I don't know if Matthew has joined yet, so let's maybe give him a minute more, and if not, we can start. Okay, well, I guess we can get started. So, hello everyone. My name is Ivail Petrov, and this is the cozy meeting of this virtual IETF meeting. This is an official IETF meeting, and as such, the note well applies. Please read it carefully before participating in any discussions, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the other chairs. This meeting is also recorded, and presence will be taken, and this will happen automatically, so no action is required from your side. And this is our agenda for today. We will first have a few updates for drafts. We'll present you our new chair, and then we will move on to some discussions that has been partially happening on the mailing list surrounding the X509 draft, the certificate, CBOR encoding, and IANA registration policies. Is there any passing of this agenda? Yes, Goran?
Hi. Yes, I have a proposal for the any other business. If we could have a few minutes just to discuss the need for defining a COSE header map for raw public keys, which, as far as I understand, there is nothing defined yet, and that could be useful, for example, in Lake.
Okay, well, yeah, let's try to have that, and that sounds good to me. Okay. So the minutes will be taken here. Please help with the taking of the minutes. I know me and Michael would be taking a look there, but probably someone helping out there will be really helpful. Are there any volunteers? Okay, well, Christian, would it be possible to take action items? Make sure that they're in the minutes. I think everything else should be perfectly fine. Handled by us. Okay, thank you. Okay, and yes, Jabber, I will be looking at it as well. So, of course, if you observe that we have missed anything, please speak up, but that should also be handled. So on the chair changing side, Matthew Miller, who has been co-chairing with me so far, will be stepping down as COSE chair, and we are pleased to welcome Michael Jones to replace him. So I would personally like to thank Matthew for all his help, and thank Mike for taking this opportunity to help with the COSE chairing. Mike, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Ben and the ADs for inviting me to have this opportunity to serve the working group in the IETF in this way. I'm sure many of you know me. I have been involved in this working group and others, this one since its inception. I was one of the people who read the original drafts in excruciating detail and provided feedback to Jim and what have you. And I've also done 2 algorithms drafts for COSE, as well as helping other groups like the W3C WebAuthn use the COSE algorithm identifiers. Many of you probably know me because I was one of the primary editors of the Jose specs in JSON, as well as working in OAuth and OpenID Connect. I've produced something like 24 RFCs with many of you, but this is the first time I've been an IETF chair, so I'm looking forward to both helping with progress and learning some things along the way. So look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I just wanted to jump in, Ben Kedek, as the AD, to say thank you to Mike as well for stepping in this role. You have a lot of experience with Jose and COSE and the IETF and standards groups in general, so it will be great to be able to benefit from your experience. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you. And now with the status update, we have now a good number of RFCs that are in RFC editor queue. So hopefully we should have them finished very soon. We have our new charter up for discussion by the ISG like almost 2 weeks from now. So we are looking forward for any feedback on that. And we have the COSE countersign document that is still in the working group, and Michael Richardson is preparing the Shepherd's write-up so that we can move it forward. There have been a question, should it update RFC 8152 or the BIS struct? I think that was discussed in the mailing list and some conclusion was already reached, but If you have some other thoughts on that and you want to discuss it now, please raise your hand. I'll take that as a no. So moving along, an extra administrative question would be to discuss the future interim meetings. Do we want to have them or not? My personal opinion is that they have been quite useful in the past, so it could make sense to continue with them, but we wanted to hear the working group's opinion. Okay, I see some support in Jabber for continuing. So with that, I think it's time for John and X509 points that were still left for discussion.
Yeah, thank you. So this
Question.
Yep.
At what cadence would people like to have the interim meetings? With what frequency have they been held in the past, and is that what we want to do going forward?
We
I
were
think in the
having
past
them.
they were too not frequent enough. But it really depends on whether we have active discussion going on a draft. So I would expect in the next couple of months we will still talk a lot about the SIBO encoded certificates. So I think we will need more frequent interims, and when that has left the working group, we probably can reduce the frequency again a little bit.
Okay.
So Michael says in the chat that every 2 weeks was good for him, but too frequent for others. Karsten, what do you think?
Could those others speak up?
maybe every month.
Hannes seems to support every month. De facto, 2 interims between IETFs is about once a month per what Ben was saying. Michael points out that every 4 weeks is easier to schedule than every month.
Yeah, if I may jump in, Göran Slander. I think I just agree with Karsten saying that it really depends on whether people have time to progress the work, how much we need. I think it's a good idea to have at least one interim, perhaps 2, before the next IETF.
Okay, so it sounds like we want to have at least 2-3 interims, so once per month, more or less. One option is to schedule them like every 2 weeks and then just cancel some of them if we see that we don't have enough progress or something like that. Maybe we can discuss it also in the mailing list in the interest of time. But yes, Ben, do you want to say something?
Yes, I think we have some good input from people, and hopefully the chairs can make a concrete proposal about, maybe having 2 interims before 111 about once every month, and we can get confirmation on the list that that's going to work for most people.
I agree. Let's proceed that way. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
All right, on to our presenter.
Thank you. So this is, I got an action point to try to summarize the discussion on the GitHub issues, the discussion on the list, and the discussion on the last interim, and try to make a PR out of that. So this only talks about this PR, and the PR, I can take next slide. The PR tries to address 4 different issues on GitHub, 21, 30, 31, and 33. See, and the pull request is number 35. This try to address this based on the discussion on the list. You can take next slide. So the main solution here was the solution suggested by Russ to use X5T together with the other parameters to make it secure. I tried to make a PR based on this and the other comments, and the main goal for the PR was to not change any currently secure implementations or deployments, but to make everything secure and also try to fulfill the different use cases people had. So to summarize, the PR added that you need to integrity protection of the end entity certificate is required unless the CA did proof of possession. Then later today, Lawrence pointed out that this is not enough, and that there's also the use case when the CA gives out several certificates for the same key. So the PR definitely needs to be updated. Then added that integrity protection, as I said, can be added by using X5T together with other headers. Added a 1-sentence explanation that X5 bag and X5 chain in unprotected allows an intermediate to remove old CA and add CA certificates. As requested by Michael, added a clarification that X5T refers to an end entity certificate. Added media type application CBOR for COSE X509. There was a comment by Karsten stating that if we do this, it should be a more explicit media type, so something like application COSE X59 or COSE X59 chain even. And then if you do end entity protection of the certificate, I think then you end up with that you don't need any requirements for protection of the URI. And then I added security considerations based on integrity protection, which is quite separate but discussed in the same thing. And then why integrity protection of the end entity certificate is needed for proof of possession. That will then need to be updated based on Lawrence's comments. Next slide, we can look through the different changes. So these are security considerations. Quite simple. These would need to be updated based on they need to be updated based on Lawrence's suggestion that this is not enough. There is other reasons why you need to protect the end entity certificate as well. I think we can, as long as there is no comment, I think we can just move on. Next slide.
Just a comment here. We are adding reference to ATOC, whether this is something we want to do. I mean, here it's not like explicitly referenced, but I guess we will need to somehow say what this thing is. So maybe we will need to have an informative reference if we keep the text like that. Whether this is something we want to do, maybe not. Just a comment.
Yes, I think if we add that it should be an informative reference, it might also be enough that saying that you can might not even be needed a explicit reference either. You can talk about things in general terms also. Next. So here's the text added that I suggested to add to X5 bag. So first sentence is an addition of this adding or removing certificates, intermediate certificate that's requested by Michael. And then it's text stating that unless you know that these certificates were issued in a secure way, you need to integrity protect the end entity certificate. And then it lists ways that this can be done. For example, by putting the header in the protected header, or using X5 bag in unprotected with X5T in protected, or by including the end entity certificate in the external AAD, as is, for example, used by ad hoc. And the proof of possession text here would clearly need to be updated. And then the question now, when it's not only proof of possession, but also the same key in several certificates, do we want to have this flexibility, or is it cleaner to go for must integrity protect?
John, a question, since you raised this question, what are the main use cases, like in general, that may answer some of the questions whether you need this or that?
What do you mean? It was very unspecified question. I don't understand what you mean with this or that.
Like the document is includes, like, for example, the document specifies a number of ways to pass X509 certificates for different types around, such as the one that you show on the screen with the bag of certificate. And so it depends a little bit on what use case you are trying to cover, on whether all of those things are needed. Because one of the problems I had with COSE was, like, it's a laundry list of things, and then nobody implements the laundry list, and then it turns out that it's often incomplete, ill-specified, and so on. So I'm curious, like, what are the use cases we start with? And my next question would then be, are you implementing them to see whether the description is actually matches reality then in terms of code?
I think I'm the wrong person to ask here. I've not written this document. I'm only providing this PR that fixes these 4 issues. But maybe somebody else can answer if we have time. This seems to like a much more general, open question on the whole document.
Okay, thanks, Han. Goran, do you still want to say something, or?
Yeah, I mean, John had a question about how we should formulate the statement here, whether we should go for proof of possession or make a must requirement instead. for integrity protection. And I think that would simplify things to go for must. This becomes very complicated for anyone to comply with. So that's one comment. Then we had a discussion on the previous slide on the mentioning of examples here, and in this slide there is also mentioning of ad hoc here as a protocol. And I think that this is motivated here because it's an example of how COSE is being used in a security protocol, which is not the case for the previous slide, where there's basically it doesn't have to be used within the protocol. So that would be a reason why you would actually give the example with external AAD as a clarification. I think that aligns a little bit with Hannes is missing explanations here, so I think that should be kept in the slide 5.
Okay, next slide is chain. It's exactly the same thing as bag, except that it says chain instead of bag. So I think we can move on. And the example up here illustrates how you send chain in unprotected and X5T in protected. Of course, you can also send both of them in protected. Next slide. So here is X5T. I added text to clarify this is an end entity certificate. There was a comment about that on the list or in the issue tracker. And then similar text, but not exactly the same as for bag and chain. And proof of, I think here it seems like we are leaning towards having must integrity protect. Yeah, and then we have sending in protected header or include it in the external AAD. And then a backward reference to bag and chain. Take next. So X5U, here we had comments from Michael that he did not want to implement PKCS7. So I added here application CBOR. There was a comment from Karsten that this was too general and we should have something else, maybe COSE X509 chain or something, if we agree that this should be a chain. So yeah, agreement on the chat or alignment on must, seems like. Any comment on using application CBOR? No. I guess I assume people are fine with that and make it more specified. Yeah. Okay, next, unless there's any comment on. So here is similar text for X5U as bag and chain. Similar here. First is similar if you need to integrity protect this, and you can do that with X5T or with external AAD, as is done in ad hoc. Then we end up with now we don't always need this URI protection. In fact, I think if we go for must, we don't need this URI protection at all, maybe, except if you want to transfer new trust anchors. But here in this text, it's now divided into two sections. One, if it is integrity protected, then the URI does not need any protection. And if it's not integrity protected, then you need the same protection as you had in the old version, where you need, for example, HTTPS on the URI. Yeah, discussion of media type on the list. It's good. Can go to next slide. Yeah, I think that's just a summary. Any high level, I think, seems no objection to this. Seems like people so far positive on the list. We go for must, need to explain the security consideration based on Lauren's comment. It's not only proof of possession, and then a more specific media type. People agree that that's the way to go.
This is Ben. Yes, I think we should have a more in the chat.
Cutting off, I guess you said more specific media type.
Yes, there is good support for that in the chat room.
Hannes, in the chat, I think we just said that we don't want to mention ad hoc in the text because you would have to add a reference, and that is a bit late in the process. So we should be using more general terms than specifically referencing ad hoc.
And then I responded to that and said that for the in order to illustrate how the external AAD is used, that would be one reason to keep it. But otherwise, we could rewrite that part as well. But that would we need to change the part which is specifically mentioning how external AAD is used.
Yep, I agree.
Yes, Hans.
Well, I record in the BR like ad hoc being mentioned 5 times. Sounds to me a little bit overselling, but I think I understand. But I understand the motivation. But yeah.
I think it's more or less the same text copied 4 times. I think it's more or less mentioned in 2 different sentences, one with TLS and DTLS as a way to provide identity protection, and one as an example of a protocol that uses COSE's external AAD.
Yeah, I think it should be independent of those protocols, whatever the next favorite thing is, and there would be like there's new stuff already being developed now, so this would be there would be a continuing list of protocols being used in that context. So
I think it's a good idea. I don't mind leaving out specific protocols, but I think we should explain that the value of putting the certificate in external AAD providing integrity protection. I think that's what the message that we shouldn't leave out.
I think ad hoc can definitely be removed from the body of the text. I think in the security consideration, it might make more sense to give examples, such as TLS or ad hoc or IPsec.
Yeah, I agree with Göran. Describe more the property rather than specific instantiations.
So we should remove TLS also.
Yes, and IPsec as well.
Okay. Do that.
Okay, are there any other comments on this draft? Oh, thank you, John. And thanks everyone for the discussion. So next, I think, John, it's again you. The CBOR encoding.
Yeah. So we have 25 minutes left. I think this can be quite short, and we can leave things for the next interim. How much time do you need, Göran, for the IANA and your other business? Do you need 10 minutes or?
5 minutes each. Yeah, 10 is fine.
Good. CBOR encoding of X509 certificates. So I think one of the big changes are actually the name. Was discussion on the list, and I think we agreed on CBOR encoded X509. We have added a abbreviation C509 in this draft. There's not been much discussion on the list for that, so I don't think we can say that there's consensus about, but that's the current working assumption. Feel free to comment if you want that to change. So just the overview for people that has not been on the interim. This has expanded. It was initially a small profile of 7925. Then the comments have been that we have shifted to cover quite much of 5280 and do very little profiling. So this is an encoding of 5280, or large part of it. The things that make sense for IoT covers 7925, the new TLS 1.3 IoT profile. They're very similar, but might be some changes. IEEE, we will add an example certificate for that. And then we are trying to cover the CA browser forum baseline. Yes, and they're called C509 certificates, and we also make registrations so the certificates can be used in COSE and TLS. Next.
John,
Yeah.
in some sense, I was wondering how this relates to another document I have been co-authoring, which defines how to use CWTs in TLS. Because in some sense, what you want is kind of the functionality of a CWT rather than a plain COSE. Or am I getting this wrong?
So this is not the C509 certificates are not COSE. They are the document contains two different types. I think they're called types. One is a compressed X509 their encoded certificate. So you can use it as a compression mechanism, but it registers in TLS as a certificate type. The other type is a CBOR, a natively signed C509 certificate. And the only changes between them is that in the one type, the signature is over there, and in the other type, the signature is over CBOR. But so far, there's no COSE in either of them.
Okay, I missed that part because like the draft name was compressed X509 certificates, right? And that's how you initially sort of advertised it. And the feature it offers is obviously you can use an existing X509 certificate, and as the name says, it like there's a compression on the wire. The downside that has its beauty, but then the downside is obviously you need to now have the implementation, the X509 parsers and libraries, as well as the COSE, the CBOR /COSE libraries, and you now, like at some point in time, you changed that scope, but still had the same in the same document. Is that's quite a big change.
I think natively sign was in the original document also. I think the draft name is still compressed. We will change that as soon as we are working group adopted and change it to CBOR encoding. The word compressed is gone from the draft body of the draft itself, and based on discussion in the working group, we have changed from registering a TLS compression algorithm to a TLS certificate type. My plan is to go to after this is working group adopted, or if it is, which I hope it will be and look like it is, then I will go to TLS working group again and ask what the TLS working group thinks about this, and if they want this, and if they think it's the right choice, and if they think this should be done in COSE, or if we should write the TLS document doing that registration.
Okay. Yeah, I always like, we had a discussion in TLS earlier on this, and there you advertised it as a you only put an emphasis on the compression feature, not on the native CBOR feature. So that's why I was confused.
Yeah, I think it has been discussion in COSE whether that would be standardized or not. And now we have ended up that COSE should standardize natively sign. There has been where I think most of the interest have been. Relating comparison to CVT, I would say that CVT might be more flexible and new, and that the C509 certificates are with like profiling and content is just a different encoding of X509. So there's nothing new. It's a large subset of X509 with a much more efficient encoding.
And I remember that I asked you whether you implemented the document, and you pointed out that, yeah, we implemented the compression, but did you then implement the other part as well?
No, we have only implemented compression and working on that, and that is soon done. My plan is still to release the compression as open source, maybe till summer.
Okay, cool.
I have not. Some point in time I hope to implement the inverse also, but that has not been done and will not be done for a while.
Okay.
So, next slide. Next slide. So, not going through any earlier, these changes were discussed from 03 to 06 was discussed on earlier interim. Links to these presentations are here if you want to see them. Next slide. So these are the changes from 06 to 08. Some moving information in the draft. Göran did this change, but it's natively signed certificates is definitely there. So there's some restructuring of sections. Name change with Carlson and Michael pointed out that you should not call these CBOR certificates. So the new is C509 certificates, which is a combination of CBOR and X509. Then there is quite some changes to the header parameters, bag chain tag and URI, based on the X509 discussion. These are, I think these need further updates. I stopped updating after and plan to wait until the X509 discussion is finalized. That's more urgent and should be the basis for the CBOR certificates. Based on the discussion, there was a request to add a tag. and if you want, and based on that, we created a new structure, COSE C5, which is an array containing one or more CBOR certificates. And the CBOR certificates are sequences, so you can just add them after each other inside an array. And then there is a tag, I think we have. And then from 07 to 8, there was just formatting changes. Thanks, Karsten, for making a PR to remove these annoying long lines, which I apologize for. Next slide. So a lot of open issues. I think some of them are very minor and some of them just minor. We'll go through some of them as much as we have time. The rest have to wait for an interim. Some of these can probably be closed also. Next. So I think we can go to next slide immediately and start discussing the issue. So first, this says new issue here, but I think nobody has, I don't think we have done an issue on GitHub yet, but this was after reading the TLS IoT profile in Utah and the discussion in SEC dispatch seems to be a lot of discussion of moving more information to subject alt name. I think the TLS profile changes what is going into subject alt name compared to the TLS 1.2 version. So the question is more, I think we support everything. The question is, should we change what we optimize for in the subject alt name fields? Hannes.
Yeah, Rich had in his document, he talks about the server side, server authentication, and for the web, and the reference Utah document talks about client authentication for IoT devices. So the question to me is whether the use of SANs on the web for servers should also imply that we should use the same for IoT environments for client sites, or whether his proposal actually also applies to client certificates in sort of, let's say, smart app environment or wherever TLS is used.
Yeah,
What do you think?
We have 2 more minutes for this presentation. Do you think we should move this to the minute list, maybe?
I think we need, I don't know what should be done, but I think the CBOR certificate draft will mostly look at, as we had discussed before, this document should not do much profiling. This will look at what other documents do and try to optimize the encoding for that. So I think we should maybe cut here. I think it was great input from Hannes, and it's good to have some discussion with people that has not been in the working group for a while and active in TLS. I think we need to discuss the rest of the issues at the interim.
Okay, so it sounds like we can switch to Jörgen. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay, so this is about YANA registration and some guidance requested from the working group. Next slide, please. So there is someone whistling in the background. It's very nice, a bit unfamiliar sound though. we have in the current COSE IANA register only. Okay, please mute.
Hi, this is playing weirdly. It seems that you are the only unmuted person now next to me. So I don't know where this is coming from.
Okay, so maybe there is something wrong with the setup. Thanks you for confirming that you actually hear it, Ben. I thought it was in my head. So good that someone else hears it as well. I'll try to just talk, see if it works. Anyway, so what I'm aiming at here is that it's really distracting. What this COSE currently doesn't define just encryption without MAC, and there are authenticated encryption and authenticated encryption with additional data. And that's also explained or clarified in the content encryption algorithm section, which is giving the restriction to only use authenticated encryption with additional data. But there are settings where where only encryption would be needed. And we'll take that in the next slide, please. So there is, first of all, this request from FIDO Alliance registering just encryption algorithms. There is cipher block chaining and AES encounter mode. And it's not really clear from the specification because it's mentioning both encrypt and MAC then encrypt. So it's not really clear exactly what they intend to use it with. But one instance which is presented is COSE encrypt 0 wrapped in a COSE MAC 0. So this is actually a second request for, and the motivation is there to support legacy hardware. And this is actually the second request from FIDO to register legacy algorithms. Previous requests resulted in an RFC, which is authored by our new working group chair. So we are familiar to this situation. And this might be the same type of request might be going back from IETF to actually make a registration to explain how they are going to securely use COSE encrypt with COSE MAC. And then I just want to point out that this is not the only, next slide please, this is not the only use of encryption only, so encryption without MAC. There are two other examples. So for example, in ad hoc, in message 2, it's only, by the security proof, it's only required to do encryption without integrity. And in this case, it's using stream cipher, but it could just as well have been using COSE with an encryption without MAC, but that's not specified, so we can't use that for ad hoc. So that might be others in the same situation where they would like to use COSE with an encrypt, but it's not specified. And the third example is Grupos core, where we currently, which is about group communication, and there is a signature for source authentication. So currently we use it with an COSE encrypt with an AAD and a signature, which means that we have both a MAC and a signature, and that is too much overhead. We can reduce the overhead by removing the MAC without changing the security properties. So that's basically what I wanted to say. We can go back to the previous slide and discuss the specific request from FIDO, but I think that the general question to the working group is, are we fine with actually registering encryption algorithms without MAC? If that's also, there is also a supplementary specification explaining how this is used securely with security considerations. Any objections to this?
Yes.
I hear none. Okay. Yes,
Ben
sorry.
Perhaps it does seem like this is something that we should probably allocate code points for, especially because COSE is sort of more of a framework than an actual protocol. We don't have a great reason to limit what people can build using our toolbox. The question that I have is more of whether we want to change the structure of the registry to have it more prominent that there is a warning label that applies to this mechanism, or if we think that the existing require it to be in their specification, or if we have a description that could say something, if that's enough.
We have the recommendation column, sort of recommended, which could be either, I think it could be yes, no, or deprecated, if I remember correctly. I don't know if we want to, if it's sufficient with no in this case, or if we want to say something more.
I think that's a question to everybody, not just for me.
Yeah, right.
So this is Mike speaking just as an individual. I will note that the Jose registry has some things registered as being prohibited. And we could add to the COSE algorithms registry that categorization as well. So for instance, SHA-1 is registered as an algorithm. Its use is prohibited, but there were legacy reasons to be able to reference that as an algorithm. I believe that came from W3C Web Crypto. So I'm perfectly good adding code points. I will say that recommended versus not recommended is not strong enough. We already also have deprecated. I think if we're going to do this for some of the legacy stuff, we should add prohibited as a categorization to the COSE registry, just like there is in the Jose registry.
So question for you, Mike, would that be the same column as recommended or a separate column?
Same column, just increase the number of values.
Okay, fine by me. Any other comments? Okay, so yeah, Ben is proposing adjectives here. Perhaps we could, what do you think? Could we move this to the list, try to agree on how to handle that, and then we respond to FIDO Alliance as described here. Do we have a minute for any other business, Ivailo? Please.
Okay,
What do you mean, Göran? What do you mean by this? How we decide on how we respond to FIDO Alliance? What do you mean by that? So I made the request on behalf of the FIDO Alliance.
Right. Could we take this offline, Hannes? We only have a minute left. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. So is it okay, Ivailo, to speak about raw public keys for a minute? So there is no slide. Exactly. Thank you. Okay. So just quickly, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to bring this up in the last minute. So it has been requested from several parties that we need to define raw public key, a COSE header map for raw public key. It is, for example, it's a requirement by the Lake Working Group, and it might be used in other settings as well. So and the question I wanted to raise here is, apparently I already got some comments on the Jabber, is if we need a separate specification for that, and what, how we should handle that in relation to things like Bob Moskowitz mentioned, the 7250, which is not the most efficient representation, but it's sort of we can have the analog representation using the TBS certificate data structure to the to-be-signed certificate data structure in C509, which also provides public key and an identifier, but no signature. So any quick comments on that? What people think about, should we define it as a in an analog way as RFC 7250, or should we just define it as another CBOR, another COSE header map?
COSE key is maybe the word you're looking for.
Right, sorry, yes. But what we still need to have the canonicalization of the right? So I'm reading the Jabber here and saying that what you provide. The question is, we need to have this, still have the header map. Like if you look at the X509, for example, we have a COSE header map to index whether this is an X5T or an X5 chain. And the similar type is what I'm requesting. The type which is indicating that this is a particular COSE map. Okay, there's no one wants to jump on the line, and I see a lot of comments here. So I suppose we just move this to the mailing list, unless there are other further comments. So there is no raw public key draft, Hannes. This is something that is just proposed as an yeah, okay. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I guess Renee was in the queue before me. So. Go ahead.
Hello?
I hear you, Renee.
Okay. I just have a brief question because we are in the any other business section. As you all know, I've requested some COSE registrations for things in the LB curve draft. And I was wondering how we can speed up some of the discussions so that we can more easily get to a resolution. So the first round has taken more than 3 months without any satisfactory technical discussion. So I was wondering whether we could do it in a different way, or if people have suggestions how to make it seem more collaborative instead of now it feels like blocking. So currently we have a YANA expert review, and it's handled offline. And it seems to be a moving target, and discussions on the COSE mailing list also seem to be separated from what's actually in specifications. I would really like to see that if there's discussion, that there will not be a 2-month silence period happening, and there will be discussion on technical merit as also stipulated in some of the specification works. Any comment? Any comment also wider from the wider COSE group?
So I guess I can comment that I have a partial review of your draft, and I'm planning to get back to that hopefully in the next week or two, which I think will include some comments about the COSE registrations, but I can't promise that quite yet.
Yeah, so this is more a general question. I wanted to separate it from particular things about 6 one-character strings in that specification. I was just wondering, how can we make the process more conducive to getting to the result instead of making it an endless dragging, mind-numbing exercise?
So, Renee, this is Göran Zelander. I think you have been provided an answer. At least I've answered the IANA like a month ago when we had this last mail exchange.
After 3 months of silence, and there has been some offline discussions where it seems that people are interested in blocking things instead of moving forward.
Yeah.
And I commented already on Ben Kaduk's email that a few weeks ago, but I have not seen any response that all the half-baked ideas on the COSE mailing list don't work.
So, as I said, I think there has been an answer to the IANA, at least what I know from my side. There might have been something not going all the way back to.
So the reason I mentioned this under any other business is not to have a discussion with you on this solely, because you have not responded from November to February onwards in any responsive fashion, and I think the process needs to be changed.
So Renee, if you have issues with non-responsivity from IANA review processes, you should talk to the ISG or the responsible AD, which would be me.
I have had many discussions with ADs, but it seems that we have to wait till some people drop off or something. But so I think we should have a discussion on technical merit and not discussion based on
specifics,
political blockage.
There have been several classes of potential technical issues that were raised, and we only had actual back and forth discussions about some of them. There's at least one where I think you were the last one to respond, and there was not a follow-up. But I think there were some where there were issues raised and you did not follow up. So I think there's work to be done on many fronts here.
I think the political posturing has to stop, because there was already discussion 1.5 years ago by Jim Schad, who unfortunately is not here anymore. But I want us to be constructively moving forward and not get the impression that people just for whatever purposes, they want to drag things on and not even have a look at the RFC's 8152 details.
I agree we should be focusing on the technical aspects and not political posturing, and I do not recall a specific instance of political posturing. I think that we need to continue the technical discussion, and that it is on all parties involved to continue to do so. I also know that we are quite far over time, and I do want to make sure now that Matt has actually joined the session that I get a chance to thank Matt as the outgoing chair for all his service. Matt, you've been really great for this working group, and we appreciate all you've done. So thank you again, and best of luck as you move on to newer and greater things.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for the time. And like you said, we're almost 10 minutes over, so unless there's anything else, I think we can call this a wrap.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, thank you, everyone.
See you later.